right, let's get started. Sorry, 1 second. I'm trying to figure out how to set up a Zoom webinar properly.
Hey, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now, Richard.
You can't see me though, right?
No, I cannot.
Okay.
Let's see. I wonder if I can control this. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
No,
That's
no
all right.
worries. You're doing great. And also, the chat's still disabled.
Okay, let me figure this out. Or
I wonder if we can save our settings once we figure this out for next week's.
yes, good idea. Everyone. Wait, can folks see this? Are folks, did someone get my chat message?
Yeah, we see it, but we have a disabled
I see. Let me see. How's everyone's day going in the meantime? I think I gave most folks permission to speak, so please feel free to like chime in as well. And I'd love to get folks to also demo things. And so feel free to like chime in and I'll figure this out in the meantime.
Yeah. Does
Yeah,
anyone have any
for
demos?
Going
Don't-
great. Excited for this MCP session.
Awesome. Presentations.
Does anyone have demos that they want to share?
well, if someone does want to share, we'll need to make it possible to share screens as well.
I
That's
think
true.
that should be possible if folks want to share their screen. Is that Richard, are you able to do that on your end?
No.
I'm just trying to, oh wow, this is very limiting. So just for some context, last time we had some I think it's called Zoom bombing or whatever, where people like jump in and try to take over the screen. So we really tried to restrict it this time, but might have gone a little too far.
I was just checking the Luma, or we put up an event on Luma initially, and we got like a 1-star review with someone pretty angry about the Zoom bombing, saying the host should take more responsibility, which is probably true.
That is true.
But
Okay.
yeah, at least this time it's better.
Yeah. This is perhaps too good. I'm still trying to figure this out. Does anybody know how to like adjust the settings for a webinar? Has anybody done this before?
No, never.
No, we're just learning as we go.
Okay, well,
I also
figure
hate
this out
Zoom.
together.
Zoom is like, every time I try to change anything in Zoom, it's pretty.
I'll start looking it up just so that you have a navigator.
That would be great.
Yeah, no problem.
I guess like so we don't have anything to demo from our side this week, just because we're trying to get we currently run stuff using Python Celery, and the MCP Anthropic library has its own way of executing stuff. So we're running into issues there. So that's the reason we don't have any demos to show this week. We're kind of blocked trying to figure out this issue. So yeah, like I don't know if people have demos to show it. Maybe there's a few demos of like MCP servers to show, and if not, like the other thing that I think we mentioned in the intro last week, that we could just talk about like community stuff, like what does the MCP community needs, like what are some blockers, what are some tools that we could use, and maybe just get feedback here from people on the call about what sort of tools do we need to move forward.
Absolutely.
I'm also keen, Sarmat. I mentioned this in our in DMs, but I really enjoyed your PR to the OpenAI agents library. Like the second it came out as well, that was cool.
Thank you. I can maybe I can share my screen on just showing that. I'll take a little bit of responsibility for getting the OpenAI to accept MCP. Let me pull that up 1 second.
Okay, so you've invited me as a panelist, which seemed to have helped a lot.
Okay. Yeah, I have I'm gonna start. I think Richard, I also added you as a panelist. So you should have like permissions. Okay, there we go. Your screen is working.
Yeah, everything worked.
So how about this? Maybe what we can do is if folks wanna like speak or demo or say anything, just like raise your hand. And I hope that works. And we can then like, I can promote you to a panelist. You'll have control. You can kind of like share your screen and whatnot. And then I can like, we can go that way for now. And for next time, we'll like figure out webinar settings. I don't want to like waste folks' time too much on just doing tech support here. But in the meantime, let me show you the Agents SDK, that like the issue that I created in there.
Someone has their hand up, Yashwant. I don't know if you can you speak or
Hi,
type
can you
in the
hear me?
comments?
Yes, I
Yeah.
can hear you.
Hi, so I'm currently a student at NYU. I've been like checking out MCP. I'm like pretty new to this. Are you guys like going to be talking like in depth, or will you be giving like overview as well?
Yeah, happy to do that actually. Happy to give like a quick overview. And then Richard and I have been talking about MCP for a couple weeks now, maybe even a month. And I can also give a little bit of background about like how I got involved in it. We probably can't go into like debugging session unless like that there's a specific set of questions. But I think the overall like idea for like the model context protocol is to standardize how you give access to the world around LLMs to those LLMs. So like the world around LLMs means like what are the tools that an LLM can call into? What's the data or resources that it can access? What are the prompts if they're like structured or complex prompts that the LLM can use? And so it's almost like an AI native interface for software services. And then like we've had tool calling before, we've had like prompt management before, we've had like, RAG and some context retrieval style stuff before, but it's never been codified in like a standard way of doing it that enough people or model providers have agreed upon. And so it's been like very disparate. And so if you wanted to build like a Slack plus Gmail agent, you'd have to figure out like the APIs for those services separately and try to like stitch together an application that only works with those. But the beauty of a protocol is if every software service exposes itself in a standard way to LLMs, then you could like have a service that connects to Notion and Gmail and Slack, and in the future, like a third provider of services or a fourth provider of services seamlessly. You just have to implement the protocol instead of implement the provider specific API. So that's like at a very high level why it's valuable. And the way I got involved in it is I'll actually share my screen in a sec, but like I worked on language server protocol at Microsoft back like in 2018, like 7 years ago now. And language server protocol really revolutionized how IDEs interact with language servers to provide autocomplete and things like that. Before LSP, every IDE had its own like API surface. And so a Python language server developer would have to like implement 5 different implementations with nuances across like Atom and Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code and Eclipse and what have you. And LSP changed all that, where it made like the contract between language servers and like IDEs really crisp. And so now you can like have a single language server that works across all IDEs, kind of like how you can have an MCP server that works in Cursor and Claude Desktop and in the future many other applications. And so when MCP first came out, I was super excited, because I was like, wow, finally we're having some standardization that's gonna finally like standardize and revolutionize this space the same way that LSP did for language servers. And I think that's happened honestly even faster than I thought it would. Like I think OpenAI just yesterday announced that they're gonna standardize on MCP, so it's gonna be in ChatGPT, and it's already in Agents SDK and so forth. So that's kind of like the value of it. And yeah, I guess Richard, anything else to add to that in terms of like high level context?
Yeah, I think that was great. I think like the key word for me is just interoperability. Like I think we've seen like tons and tons of different like agent frameworks, for example, and there's no way to, how do you use like a tool from Crew AI together with like a tool from like LangChain or something, or with an agent from LangChain? Up until now, there's been no way of doing that, and everything has been kind of self-contained within their own frameworks. And what got me so excited about MCP was that it was offering a solution to this interoperability challenge that I think has been a big thing for a while. And so to give an example of that, like with MCP Agent, for example, because I think I could be wrong, but I think MCP Agent is one of the first agent frameworks using tools as MCP servers. Is that right, Sarmad?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think I created it and like during my Christmas break over like so it came out about a month after MCP was announced, and I'm pretty sure it's the first one
Nice.
that
Cool.
yeah,
I wanted
implemented it.
to make sure that was correct. But like, so that's what that means that you can do in MCP agents that you can't do in any other agent framework is you could create an agent, an MCP agent, and you could have like one tool from LangChain, one tool from Crew AI, both in Python, and then you could have like another tool in TypeScript, and that agent will be able to use all of these tools regardless of which framework it's from. So that's like step one, is to like make these tools interoperable. And one thing I'm really excited about for next steps is making like agents interoperable. So like, how do you use a Crew AI agent together with a LangChain agent? There's really like no way of doing that without a lot of manual work at the moment. So I think the next stage in all of these MCP agent frameworks is that we can use different agents together, and that's something that doesn't really exist yet. Like I've been chatting to Sarmad about how to accomplish it. Maybe you've accomplished it since we chatted. Maybe that's why you're unmuting. But I think what we're seeing is the emergence of this new type of agent framework. Before we had like agent frameworks that were self-contained, and I think MCP agent is like an example of this new type of agent framework, which is interoperable. And this is also something that the NAPTA SDK does as well. We've been trying to get like different agents from different frameworks working together with different tools, with different like memory modules from different frameworks, just making everything work together to unlock these network.
No, that's amazing. And so even though I built a framework, one of the maybe hot takes I have is I think AI frameworks are going to be less and less important in a world where there's protocols, because then you don't need like a translate. If you think about LangChain or other kind of like frameworks, they were like a pre-protocol world where they did the heavy lifting of how to like set up tools and prompts and connect to data stores and all that for you. But if there's a protocol that's kind of standardizes that, then it's like you don't need that complexity anymore. And so one of the things Richard mentioned is like, agents should be able to talk to each other and communicate and collaborate irrespective of the framework they were used to be built for. And one of the things we've realized since then, and I don't think we've chatted about this, Richard, is I think agents themselves should be MCP servers, as to enable that kind of like interconnectivity and collaboration in a seamless way. And so that's one of the things we're trying to like build out maybe next week as a company, is trying to figure out like, can you launch MCP agents that are MCP servers themselves, so that you could like do workflow runs within Claude or Cursor or other places where maybe you have like a complex workflow that, parses your GitHub Stargazers and then finds their LinkedIn profiles and then exports that to a CSV. And that's like a script you've written and you want to run it. Like maybe that's an MCP agent, but to expose it, you just have an MCP server that you connect to Claude or something, and then you say, hey, run that workflow for me with this repo, and you give it a URL, and it like runs that workflow, which is an agentic application. Whereas so far, like all the MCPs that exist so far, they're like one-to-one mappings of REST APIs or Open API specs to like MCP servers, which doesn't, and then people are asking like, oh, what's the point of MCP? Isn't it just like, REST APIs for my application? And it's just because it's so early right now that it's hard to see that value. But I think the next phase is agents as MCP servers themselves. I also think we have a hand raised, Satwik. You want to unmute yourself?
Hey, hi, Samad and Richard. Actually, I have a doubt regarding MCP clients. See,
Hmm.
I got an overview about MCP server which can interact with Postgres database or something like that. If if my if I wanted to implement in a closed system, or else in my own application, I wanted to uh, implement an agent which will interact database, and I can ask from the front end
Yeah.
without any cloud or else any kind of LLM. I mean, I'll use the API of OpenAI like that, but how can we implement that if there is an e-commerce website where I wanted to explore the analytics of the sales in my database as an admin? So, is there any existing path where we can work on like that? I mean, this is
Yeah.
very specific question, so I don't have high level of understanding
Yeah.
of this. Yeah.
No, it's a fair question. So I don't know the specifics either of like the example you gave, but at a high level, what I would say is like I think there's lots of community-driven server implementations and also official server implementations. So the first step is just discovering what services exist as MCP servers out there. If something doesn't exist, you could also like implement and contribute your own. Today, like finding MCP servers is kind of hard because there are some registries, but I think Anthropic is working on an official registry for MCP servers that you can like verify and trust and whatnot. But like once you have the servers you've identified, it's really about like putting them together into some kind of workflow. That's what MCP agent is for technically, is like being able to chain together some of those workflows, like you mentioned, like look up data from some storefront database or something. If there's an MCP server for that, then you can write an agent that kind of does that. And there are a few examples in the MCP agent GitHub repo that show how to like interact with the multiple different MCP servers and chain them together. You don't have to use Claude Desktop or something for running them. You can run them in your CLI as a script, or you could hook it into Claude Desktop or Cursor as well. But like the idea is they can be standalone as well. And from a technical perspective, what that means is the framework basically creates an MCP client for you to connect to multiple MCP servers, and it exposes like subsets of those servers as agents. So like maybe you have one agent that connects to like, GitHub and Notion, and another agent that connects to Slack and Google Drive. And those agents can collaborate and communicate with each other, but then you have like a script that runs and uses multiple of those agents to accomplish a task. And yeah, so none of that has to do with like running that in a chatbot or something. MCP is like a lot more than that. And I think like agent workflows in general are like not just chat oriented things. They're, I think they're workflow based kind of things in the long term, because they're about like doing
Uh,
something complex.
yeah, actually, the only thing I have doubt is, see, open source or else app integrations are, uh, I mean, it is already there,
Yeah.
but at the enterprise level, the data, how would you do this? I mean, how different will this be in the agentic framework or else MCP kind of thing? This how
Yeah.
easy we can implement this thing? Then it should be something like that, right? I mean,
Yeah. There
yeah.
should be, so I think like there are a few changes that have happened to the protocol that I think make it like more realistic to use in enterprise settings. Probably the biggest one is actually auth. That's usually something that like, any like we've all built, web services before. You need auth to be properly done. And so
Yes.
the MCP spec is now gonna like use OAuth as a mechanism to allow you to authenticate servers. That means that you can like do server authentication the same way you did service authentication with like pre-MCP days. And what I foresee happening is like every microservice that you think of will probably in the future expose an MCP compatible kind of like endpoint as well, which is like, so if you think of like, why do we have like these web services? It's to allow developers to interact with software in some way. But now we have AI systems that also need to interact with software, right? And so MCP is kind of like that equivalent. What's that AI native software layer that LLMs can interact with? And so I imagine there being like a future where there's almost this hybrid world where there's an MCP server for every software service, and maybe also like like regular like REST API surface that maybe the MCP service builds on top of. And so I think it's like even today it should be possible to like with the new spec with auth to do this in an enterprise setting with all the controls that you expect.
Got it. Yeah. Thank you so
Good
much.
question, though. Good question. Also, let me share my screen. I wanted to show the Agents SDK thing just real quick, because it's kind of fun. So let me do that.
It was good marketing, I think.
Can folks see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome. So this is like the OpenAI Agents Python repo. And when it first came out, I think mine was like the third issue in the repo. And I basically asked them to add support for Model Context Protocol. And it very quickly, as you can tell, became like the most requested feature in their protocol. I also submitted a pull request to like do it, I think that same day that it came out, with like MCP Agent as the way to do it. And I also released this thing called OpenAI Agents MCP, which surprisingly has 100 stars on GitHub, no marketing at all. But basically it lets you like, this is the OpenAI Agents SDK, and you can like call an agent, you can call the tool, you can add the tools like OpenAI tools or local functions as tools, but you can also add MCP servers. Like in this case, it's fetch and file system, which you define in a config file like this. And if I just run the demo real quick. So you have this MCP agent, and it's like it can get the current weather from, it can get the current, well, why isn't this running? Weird. Lots of technical problems today, but it basically gets, you can run it to use MCP servers or local tools in like a seamless way. And so this became like the most requested feature on the OpenAI GitHub. And they just, I think yesterday, right, Richard, they released like official support, and they closed this issue for the Agents SDK having like MCP support. So now they have like a very similar looking, I think they were inspired by some of the examples I had, a very similar looking interface where you have MCP servers and you can like connect the MCP server to the Agents SDK. And this just shows, like the the framework is not the important thing anymore. Like most of the logic of how you interface with, how you get LLMs to interface with the world is actually in MCP in the protocol itself, which is really cool. So now like in theory, and this is what Richard was saying earlier, an agent written with Agents SDK, which is talking to some MCP servers, should be able to communicate with an agent written with MCP agent. Because if I look at like a basic agent example and MCP agent, it actually looks like remarkably similar. From like you define an agent, it's honestly like word for word almost. And there's like server names you give it, and you give it an instruction and a name. And like there's nothing special about this agent compared to the OpenAI agent. They're both talking perhaps to the same MCP servers. And so that's, I think, the cool part of standardization is this Finder agent should be able to communicate in the future, hopefully the near future, with the OpenAI agent. And I think that would lead to like a very nice world of multi-agent communication where the framework is less important, and the protocol is like the thing that's kind of negotiating the communication between them.
Yeah, and you can imagine some similar class for like a multi-agent system as well. Like they call it a crew and crew AI, for example. And I think
Yep.
like agents is one of the one of the parameters, and you could imagine passing in like agent MCP servers as a parameter in like a multi-agent
Right.
class, which means you can, orchestrate different agents together from different frameworks.
That's the next step, honestly, I think. And if you like, if I go into examples here, you can do that within one framework today, like within MCP agent. This is on GitHub. You can Google, we have really good SEO. So you can Google MCP agent and you'll find this. But like a workflow orchestrator, which is a more generic kind of like orchestrator. This guy basically like has access to a couple of agents. There's a finder agent that can like find files or fetch content from the internet using URLs. There's a writer agent, which like is able to write stuff to disk. There's a, and this is like, by the way, this example is like a student assignment grader. So it will like try to grade a student's assignment with these different agents and then read the assignment from disk and then also write the graded report to disk. And so here you have like a proofreader, which will grade what it gets for proofreading, like spelling, grammatical errors, etc. The fact checker verifies like factual consistency. The style enforcer verifies like, the style it adheres to some style guidelines. And then there's a task, which is very like open-ended, where you're like, hey, load the story from this markdown file and then generate a report across proofreading, factual consistency, and style adherence. And by the way, for style adherence, use the rules from these websites. Like there, I gave it the APA style guidelines, like just the URLs for it, and then write the graded report to a file on disk. So you can see, like just looking at it as a human, this task can be accomplished with these agents we defined earlier. And then there's like this orchestrator that you just say, hey, here are the available agents. Figure out the plan and go do it. Right? Like that's all that you give it, which is really cool that LLMs are good enough to kind of like do a good job at this now. And then what it generates actually is this kind of plan where this is like these are in the examples. I just wanted to show like what the agent does as planning. It first says like the first step I'm gonna take is I'm gonna load the short story from shortstory.md and I'm gonna use a finder agent to do it, which is correct. Then it says I'm gonna generate feedback on the story. And in order to do that, I'm gonna do these 3 tasks. And these are like tasks are things it can execute in parallel. And it's smart enough to know that like it can fan out in parallel to like these 3 different agents to do the like generate the feedback. And then it like and for the style enforcer, it also tells it like use the APA style guidelines. And then it like combines the feedback into a comprehensive report, and then it uses the writer agent to like write that file to disk, which is like how I would have done this as a human is like split that up. But the LLM kind of generated this plan and then executes on it. And then I think if I see my thing. I think I have like the file as well. Yeah, it like generates this like graded report with like a conclusion, recommendations, splits this up. So, and to Richard's point, like these agents right now, these can only be MCP agents. But if we standardize the multi-agent like collaboration across on the same protocol, then some of these agents might be like NAPTHA agents, others might be MCP agents, others might be like OpenAI agents or LangGraph agents or whatever. And they can still be orchestrated together. There's like nothing stopping that collaboration if it's just like a couple of MCP services interacting with each other. And also all that is to say, like, because the models are so good now, you can do fairly sophisticated things. Like this is, in my opinion, a sophisticated task, like multiple steps are involved, but you can do this now with fairly simple kind of like workflows, which is really cool. So the frameworks as a result are less important and the protocol is king.
What do you think? I was just thinking, like, I'm not sure if in the OpenAI agent framework you can add like a memory field, but I think that's something that's common in maybe like LangChain and stuff. Could you imagine like memory as MCP servers where you can use like different memory from different frameworks? Do you think that will be something as
Absolutely. And I think like, so what if I open like model context protocol, almost everything so far is like around tools, but MCP is like a lot more than that. So if you look at the core concepts, tools is just one of the things in there. There's prompts, which is something that's very underutilized right now, in my opinion. That's going to be more important. Like, organizations often are going to have like there was prompt management for a long time as a core concept, because prompt engineering is a thing that like people care about. And I imagine there's like sets of prompts or like prompt templates that become really important, and you want to share them with your coworkers or with your friends or something. And so sharing like MCP servers that contain libraries of prompts is one way of like encompassing memory. But the other thing, which is even more important, is resources. And I think resources are potentially a way of exposing memory in a structured way to agents, but also doing it through the protocol itself. And a resource can just be like, for folks who are not familiar, it can be a file, like, you attach a PDF or an image to ChatGPT or something. That's can be a resource at that point, but can also be a whole database, or it can be a vector DB if you're doing RAG, or it can be like, a combination of those things. Like you can have an array of resources that you pass in. And so I think that doesn't really, like, people haven't really explored resources yet. Almost none of the servers implement resources at the moment, but that's like something that's coming, in my opinion. And then you can imagine, like, if you use a memory server as an MCP server, then you can, like, you don't have any vendor lock-in, because you can plug and play, like we can replace that with a different memory server as long as it's like compliant with the MCP protocol, uh, pretty seamlessly. For example, like let's say you were switching from PG Vector to Quadrant or to Pinecone or something as a vector DB. If all those were exposed as MCP servers, then it's like really easy to swap them, versus if you were like implementing their APIs one by one. And so that's really like the power of standardization. And we're just at like the starting point of that transformation. It's going to radically redefine how AI applications are built in the near future.
Totally.
I
I love
Can
it.
I ask something?
Go for it.
Yeah, so like right now I'm working on a project where I've like manually like exported data from Slack, put them in a vector database, and then built like a RAG chatbot with it. And then I gave it like two tools so far. One is it can use memory, and the other is it can use Stavily for internet search.
Hmm.
And I'm trying to connect it with like multi-agents using Crew AI to have like a 3, 4 research assistants. So
Yeah.
from the whole conversation so far, if I understand it correctly, all the manual work that I've done so far in writing code and all, I wouldn't have to do all of this, and it'll be as easy as like calling an API once we have the MCP protocol.
I think it'll be way simpler. There will still
Okay.
be like some code, some integration, like you'll still make decisions, right? Like which vector DB do you want to use? And then maybe how do you want to configure the ingestion into that? Because like the ingestion part of the RAG pipeline isn't really something that MCP deals with. It deals with like the data being there already. So there's some choices that you have to make, but it'll be way simpler to integrate that. And then you don't have to like probably think about Crew AI specifically or other frameworks as specifically as before, because that interaction, in my opinion, I think those agents should be exposed as MCP servers themselves, so that it's like a really simple kind of interaction model across the board. Because like if you think about it, what does an agent do? You run an agent, so that can be like a call, right? Like a run tool call can be one thing that MCP agent server exposes. You may pause an agent workflow, or like that agent may communicate with another agent, but that can be done like with MCP or like some very lightweight framework library in the middle. And so those are the things that I would say is going to change. And maybe it'll be like 50% less code, maybe even more. That's like it simplifies, and it probably in like the next month and a half, 2 months, in my opinion.
All right. So like the current workflow I set up, I've done it using LangGraph, and
Yeah.
it's like been like a little difficult connecting Crew AI to all of this. So once let's say LangGraph adopts MCP protocols and then Crew AI also adopts the same protocols,
Yeah.
the integration would be like much easier where I don't have to worry about the manual work and all.
Go ahead, Richard.
I was just going to say, I don't think you would need LangGraph to adopt it. I think you would just need someone to have implemented, LangGraph workflows as MCP servers. So it doesn't need to be in the core framework, which is an advantage.
One question I did have, slightly different type of question from the other ones. Would just be interested to kind of understand how MCP fits into like your original last file, and just like where you kind of see that going kind of in the future. Obviously, you guys are doing a ton of stuff. We'll just see how it kind of plays in with the broader mission.
Isaac, sorry, I might have missed like the middle part of it. There was a little bit of like noise
Oh, no worries.
in the
Can you hear
middle.
me now? Can you hear me now?
Now
It's
you're
still,
breaking up.
yeah.
Oh, okay, no worries, no worries. I'll try to ask it again. Very briefly stated, would be interested to hear how, MCP agent fits into the broader vision for last mile.
Ah, yeah, that's a good question. So to be quite honest, we're still trying to figure it out. There's an insane amount of like community adoption happening just organically, kind of like this, like Richard and I have just been posting on Twitter to have like, bi-weekly demo hours, and it's amazing to see the reception and all these like thoughtful questions come in. So there's definitely like a lot of, I think, pull that the community has for an interest in having a protocol. I think for us, what we're more interested in than the framework is making it easy to kind of like what Richard was saying, building agents that work well and interact with, other potential like interoperate with other agent frameworks or other workflows, because that's really the where we are. Kind of like what one of the folks was saying is they've already got like some agent application built up, right? And they did a bunch of things. So now that they have that, how does MCP change that like calculus or that architecture? And we want to help folks be able to do that and in a more structured way. Part of it is, I think, like more infrastructure and services around it. Most of MCP servers today are running on your local computer. And to find those MCP servers, there's no registry. So you kind of like have to go to a GitHub, read its README, copy like the process standard IO starting command, and then copy it into some config to get it to work. Like it's super clunky, right? It's classic like early adoption kind of hiccups. What we're trying to do is like work on a deployment and orchestration infrastructure so that you could do like MCP agent deploy. And what that does is nothing fancy. It just like lets you deploy an agent as an MCP server that's hosted on an HTTP endpoint so that you can like do it. Also, like stateless MCPs is another thing that is going to really shake things up, I think, which is essentially a way of how web services are generally built, which is in a stateless fashion. I call an endpoint and I'm not like connected to it usually in proc. I'm, doing a back and forth, like I'm making a REST API call and then I get a response. And so that kind of like how ChatGPT completion works. And then I pass up like more of my messages and I get back more completions. And it's like a stateless kind of interaction model. MCPs are becoming more stateless. So we want to basically enable people to have agents that are MCP servers that are deployed on like in a secure infrastructure, and then also orchestrated, right? Like chatbots, I think, are a starting point, but a lot of agent applications are more about, long running workflows that may pause, they may resume, they may fail, and you might want to retry them, or there's like human in the loop involved, or like Richard keeps mentioning, like there are multiple agents that are interacting with each other, and so they're like maybe waiting on some other agent, and so then you're like at a workflow orchestration problem, right? Which is a classic distributed systems problem, but I think there's a specific shape of it for agent orchestration that we are like really excited to look into and to try to solve. And then, the elephant in the room is how do I know my agent is doing a good job, right? Like that's the hard problem of AI evaluation. I don't think anybody's really figured out agent evaluation. I think the protocol actually helps a little bit because it codifies the interaction model between LLMs and tools and resources, et cetera. And so then you can kind of like break down that agent workflow into a series of steps that is more well-defined. And then maybe you could like evaluate or provide evals for different steps of it, and then like bubble that up to end-to-end evals. Cost is it tracking is a simple but important one. Like, I've been using Claude Code, and sometimes I'm sure this is a common problem. It goes berserk, and I end up like spending, $10 in a session just trying to vibe code my way into success. And so those are like for long-running agent workflows, cost is a real thing that people want more observability and visibility into. And so I think that infrastructure is the important part, and that none of that exists right now. It's still super early, even though we're like, OpenAI is adopting MCP, so people are like, wow, the protocol is one. But the next steps from that are, I think, services and infrastructure that can do all of those things.
When you're thinking about like you have an agent that's already defined and you're just doing like MCP.deploy or something like that, then it automatically like deploys that agent. Is that onto like a hosted service that like Last Mile would provide? Or is this like your own infrastructure or something like that, and it just goes to some central registry at the endpoint? Like what is the configuration that you kind of think that will end up being?
Yeah, I mean, to start with, we're thinking, well, like people can deploy that on last mile, but I think the idea would be folks can like kind of take that infrastructure, deploy it in their own VPC, that all the things down the line that, for example, companies care about, maybe open source community cares about. But like, I think just starting small, having a service, seeing what like community uptick is like, and just building the right kind of interaction models is really important. But anyway, Richard, I also wanted to ask if you had thoughts on some of this as well.
Yeah, it's just when you were speaking, I was thinking you've been talking about the link between like evals and MCP agent, and when you were speaking, I just kind of realized that agent interoperability is such an important thing to have to do agent evals, because like there's lots of different eval frameworks, but like if you want to test your agent on an eval framework, there's like interfacing issues. So if we can like kind of standardize the interface of agents and how they interoperate, that should make it much easier to like test all agents on all evals without too much effort.
I also saw a question in Q&A. By the way, Russell, I did figure out, I think there's a Q&A side to the chat. So it's not just a chat, but there's a Q&A for a webinar, and that should be accessible to everybody.
Okay.
And so one of the questions I see there, I'll repeat it for the audience. It says, our MCP server has tools and resources, and I agree, prompts seem underutilized so far. Can you talk more on the potential use cases of prompts in MCP in the future? Richard, any thoughts on that from your end?
I'm actually guilty of not having underutilized prompts myself. So yeah, I'd love to hear what you think, Sarmad.
Yeah, so I actually think prompts are really important for complex workflows. And so let me actually share my screen to give a concrete example of like what it means, because I think the common misconception oftentimes is the prompt is like just the string, a single string that you're kind of like it's like a system prompt that someone's configuring. But I think it can, in MCP at least, it's actually more, it refers to like prompt templates. So you can have dynamic arguments, like you can actually give, you can have a function called like get code, and maybe like one of the arguments to the code prompt function is language, and language could be Python. And then the prompt may like return its prompt with like with a Python like template instead of a TypeScript one or something. So they're actually like all whole up functions that you can call within MCP. So this is actually like a good example. Like there's a prompt called analyze code for potential improvements, and the argument you give it can be the language, like the programming language for it. And then you can like call the method called prompt/get, and you give it the ID of the prompt, like analyze code. You pass it arguments, and then you get back an array of messages. So it's not just a single like string. And the really powerful thing here is the messages could have like resources inside of them. So like maybe there is like a certain case where you want to like attach a PDF or attach some kind of like context to every message that like is relevant in a certain situation. And so you can like basically use the prompts feature in MCP to create to get an array of messages that you add on before making a request. And I think the really powerful use case for this is actually for more user-facing workflows. And I constantly think of like my own examples. Like I'll share like let me very quickly. Yeah, like uh, for example, can I open this note? I have like in my notes app constantly like these prompts that I save myself for like prompting the LLM in some like different things. And so I just saved this in the Notes app right now, and I copy paste this into like different chat windows as needed, and then I edit it, and it's like super silly. But imagine like a command palette where I can just like search for a prompt that I want, or save a prompt that I constantly use, and maybe templatize that prompt so I can like modify it in interesting ways based on the context I'm using. That's where I think prompts will really shine. And then like imagine like not just for personal productivity, but like my team, maybe as an engineering team, we constantly like, edit code or lint code or format code in a particular way that's like very specific to our code base or our style conventions or something. So codifying those into prompt templates so that when we all use Cursor, we all use like Claude Code or something, we can like reuse those same prompts and share those learnings across the organization. That will be like really valuable. So anyway, I think that's where it's super underutilized right now. It'll probably be more useful maybe in a month or so when like people go beyond just the tool calling aspect. And it's also top of mind for us. Like we're trying to bake these capabilities into MCP agents so folks can at least like start playing with them and trying it out and giving feedback on what's valuable.
Do you know if it interfaces with the prompt caching, like automatically at all?
I don't think so. That might be so. The other thing is like the protocol is not fixed in stone. It's already evolved quite a bit in like the 4 months that it's been out for. And so I suspect some changes will be made or updates will be made to the protocol over time. But I don't think caching is part of it at the moment, at least.
Is there a plan? I know that Anthropic are talking about having a centralized registry for MCP servers. Would there also be like a registry for prompts or something like that? Would that be a part of it? Do you
So I've thought about this a little bit actually, because there are a couple of these like prompt management style, services out there, third party. I've always thought that like, and also I don't think like ChatGPT or Claude does a great job of prompt management in general. Like I constantly struggle to find my chats that are relevant and like continuing off of them. But I think what I do foresee happening is people publishing uh, prompt management services that are underneath the covers MCP servers themselves, so that I can like instead of using a third party service with their own UI and like completely separate stack, I could integrate that service into Claude Code or into any MCP compliant application because it's just like discovering prompts that I care about and saving them. And so that can just be like a MCP server that's running somewhere. And that could be running like on my local computer. So it could be saving the prompts on like as files on disk. It could be like saving them in GitHub or whatever, like underneath the covers, it could be doing anything. But that's how I think the interaction model will go is like MCP prompt services that are servers themselves.
So I've been using large language models for like 3 years now, and I haven't found a good reason to have like a prompt library. People have like tried to show it off internally, like, hey, look, we got this prompt library, and like
Yeah.
it didn't get adopted because it was hard to use. Like,
Yeah.
It is kind of just a string. Like, I don't really care about like the JSON-y, like there's messages aspect. Like, at the end of the day, you're trying to push context into this large language model. So I'm skeptical if that gets adopted, but
Yeah.
a lot of the MCP stuff you've been showing is like pretty cool, and I've seen a lot of cool demos of like um, interacting with agents that can go off and use tools that I couldn't accomplish like using my human abilities, and they're using human tools to do things, and it's just like, wow, that's
Yeah.
pretty cool. So
Yeah, well, see it play out. I mean, you're probably right. Like I personally don't use prompt templates, but or sorry, like prompts management services, but I still wish there it was a thing, like I get annoyed at my workflow of like having a bunch of different notes that I keep like saving and reusing. And I'm like, there has to be a better way. Somebody must have figured it out, but I don't think anybody has. But I do agree with you, like the user experience is a big part of it. Like so far it usually adds friction, not like solves it, because instead of using my notes app, I usually have to like go somewhere else that's a managed service. to find that prompt and then use it, which like defeats the whole purpose by definition. But I think MCP could change that by like embedding those prompts into whatever like application I am in. Like if you imagine like a future where every application is MCP compatible, then maybe those same prompts could show up in like my Google Docs, but also in Chat GPT desktop and also in Cursor, and that would be really cool. So we don't know, but like it will be fun to find out together.
Yeah, I think if I was going to say like, hey, from the ground up, how would we engineer like prompts? The way
Yeah.
I would do it would be like a key value store, and
Mm.
then have some sort of way to also maybe have a little bit of metadata to like have
Yeah.
the agents quickly find the prompts they need, and then also humans to be able to search it. Like this
Yeah.
would not be hard to build, and like I'm part of both the MCP community and the slop community, and like we have this like resources endpoint and memory endpoints that we're exploring, and like that's where we would stick prompts. Is like we would shove it into a key value store and then like
Right.
get it when we need it.
Yep.
So
I think that's totally fair. And maybe underneath the covers, that is how it's implemented, right? Like as a Redis or something kind of like.
yeah, as far as slop, it's we're I keep telling people we're agnostic to like we don't even want to talk about data stores. Like
Yeah.
my MVP is literally using a JSON file and has a lock around it because I have 4 workers. So like depending on which request you are, you're gonna get a lock and you're gonna be able to use it. Otherwise, you won't be able to use it. But yeah, it functions. Like that's not that's a database.
Yeah.
And so I think you could also have a version that's SQLite that's probably a little better, and then you have a version that's Postgres a little better. You have a vector store. It doesn't really matter where it like that's like as far as MCP and slop is concerned, that's like not actually part of the spec. Like it's almost out of scope, right?
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, one last thing I wanted to share. I found this in my notes the other day. So like back in Jan 2023, I don't know if folks remember like Chat GPT plugins, that was a thing before tool calls and structured JSON, that was like a thing. So I remember when we were first starting Last Mile, I was like convinced we need a protocol for like how foundation models interact with the world around them. And this is like my really crappy Amazon Basics notepad with like some ideas on what the protocol should be like. And it's kind of cool to see some of those things in MCP. Like I said, it should be JSON RPC, which it is now, which is great. It should be model agnostic and multimodal. It should have OAuth for authentication, which MCP didn't have originally, but has added since. There should be a client server mechanism. There should be like registration and a registry and all sorts of things. And it's like a little embarrassing to look at now because a lot of it was before tool calling. So it was like invoke action or did it invoke an action? It was like very basic, but it's cool to see like something from maybe more than 2 years ago now show up as a real thing in the AI community. And also like how some ideas evolve over time into like much more interesting things that then become standards. So I'm just very excited that like, MCP is a thing. And also I really am grateful for all the amazing questions today. I think Russell, you were here last time, so we've done a much better job of like having thoughtful conversations without interruptions this time. So I know we have only 3 minutes left, but happy to take any other questions and also tell your friends about this space and hopefully like we can, keep the momentum growing over this. There's so much interesting stuff that we've only barely scratched the surface of. And so just would love to have this kind of space to talk about it, to get your feedback, and yeah, to build things together.
Yeah, and I think we're all learning how to build agents and multi-agent systems in this new way. Like a lot of people are used to using like Crew AI and LangChain, and so part of the idea for these calls was to like form a community of people that are building this new type of multi-agent system within this new type of agent framework. So hopefully, maybe we can touch on that more next week. But like, what are the current like bottlenecks or friction points for building agents with various tools, or maybe in future like multi-agent systems with different agents. We want to like we want to discuss like our issues building these types of apps and how to solve them as a community.
And maybe Richard, next time I'd love for you to give a demo of like naphtha as well, a little bit to folks, and like maybe concretely like how you were thinking of multi-agent interaction.
Yeah, totally. I think we're still working on becoming MCP compatible. We like it's kind of similar to your Notepad, I guess. Like we kind of decided that running like tool servers different to like agents, we decided this was an important thing. And there's there's even an image in our docs that looks very similar to like the multi-agent use case that Anthropic showed. And so like we just called them something different. We called them modules. And so they're similar but different, and we're trying to make them MCP compatible. And there's been a few issues. I think because the protocol is still developing as well, and the libraries around us. Like one of the issues is that naphtha does its own execution in Python Celery, but also the MCP Anthropic library does its own execution. So like I don't even know if like should execution be decoupled from like the library, the SDK for the protocol. Like that's something that I'm thinking about at the moment. But yeah, we should have something to demo soon where we're like working through these problems. And we like what I really want to demo is making a call to an agent or a multi-agent system from like Cursor or something, all done through naphtha. So
That
yeah,
would be cool.
hopefully next week or the week after.
That's awesome. Yeah, maybe on that note, we can end 1 minute early. And yeah, thank you everybody for joining. This was super fun. Richard and I are trying to keep this like as free form and without like a concrete agenda as possible. And if you have things to demo as well, would love to like just give you the floor and so you can share things with the community. So yeah, please just try to find us on Discord as well. I think the MCP agent repo has a link to the Discord. I'll try to find it as well. I see a question in the Q&A. But yeah, like come find us, send this webinar invite to others. I think the link allows you to like we're gonna do this every 2 weeks. So yeah, hopefully see you in 2 Thursdays from now.
I just had one quick idea, Sarmad, because I know you're going to be at the AI Agent event in New York. Maybe we should do like a live version of this.
I like
be
that
super.
idea. Absolutely. Yeah, let's do that. I'm super down.
Awesome.
Cool. Awesome. Let me just
All right.
share the link to the Discord because I think someone asked that in chat. But yeah, otherwise, see you folks in 2 weeks' time.
All right. Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.